Welcome back to the Neuro-Spiritual Awakening podcast with Dr. Val. This is episode 11. As you know, I'm obsessed with numerology, and of course, 11
That's a good
is
number.
the psychic life path, which happens to be my life path, believe it or not. So it is just
Nice.
perfect that I have you on the show, Dr. Daniel Atkins. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the pod. And you are an intuitive psychologist. So how perfect that you're here for episode 11 of all episodes. Really, really welcome to the show. I'm thrilled that I found you out there in the ethers, and I'm really excited to learn what you're all about, your awakening process, share it with the world, and support others in their awakening process through this conversation. So welcome, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yay! All right. Well, as I said a moment ago, before I hit the record button, I'll have you introduce yourself so that we get the full picture of, or as much as we can, of who you are, what you're up to, and
Okay.
like that.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I don't know if I'll get the whole pic. I don't know if I have the whole picture, to be honest, but I'll share what I can. Um, my name is Daniel. I was trained as a clinical psychologist, and through that process, I started to learn a lot. I learned a lot about what was a fit for me, and then slowly, as I got toward the end of that training, what wasn't starting to really feel in alignment anymore, and where I was guided to expand. And a lot of the impetus for that was my personal healing journey, as it is for most, right? So it was my body. I'd struggled with chronic pain and illness for a number of years. That was a manifestation of my own trauma, my own wounds, as well as various indicators that my soul was wanting something more, something different. And so as I got to the end of that training, and I was continuing to get sick still, and my body was kind of leading me elsewhere, I started to explore other mediums, other pathways, but primarily, again, it was guided by my personal seeking through suffering, and just wanting to get healthy. And I'd struggled with health issues my whole life, mental and physical. So right at that pinnacle, when I seemed to have what I wanted, career wise and on the outside, my that inner world that had always been there, bugging me, pulling me, out of things that I wanted to leap into, showed up again, and sort of was keeping me on track, even though it didn't. It felt like it was pulling me off the rails, but later I could see that it was its own path, and that led to various kinds of healers, and spiritual modalities, and intuitives, and shamans, and this whole world that I really wasn't. I wasn't closed off to. I just wasn't exposed to. It was really my mother that first started introducing me to some of these people out of her genuine desire to help. And so for a little while, I tried to navigate keeping some of that world not private, but separate from the way I was still showing up to perform as a psychologist at a clinic, and a more traditional sort of depth-oriented approach, and with diagnostic systems and diagnoses, and all kinds of things. And then I just couldn't keep it separate, and it was really, I was almost starting to fall asleep in sessions, like, which was not, a common thing. I loved my work, but it was like it's like my body was pulling me out of this space, because without that, I probably wouldn't have left. And so it was around actually COVID, when I think there was a large pivot for a lot of people, and I was starting to work online, and I was just realizing I had just passed the licensing exam, which took months of cramming and studying, a lot of useless knowledge, even for traditional psychologists. It's
Oh,
just things that you're never going to need to know. And
yeah.
after that, it's like I knew. I didn't know where I was going or what was going to happen, but I knew that it was time to leave, and to set out on a different path. And right at that same time, there are no coincidences, but my body was starting to heal because of these other methods, energy healing, and just messages from intuitives that were supporting me. And it was all just this energetic expansion. I started to feel, emotions like moving up my spine. I started to have these energetic experiences I couldn't explain. And that's, when the intuitive piece came on a lot stronger. And, I think for a lot of people, if these things tend to happen, like they did for me, you reflect back and you realize it was always there. That piece of me was always there. It was just, it was stuffed down, or, I didn't embrace it because it was wrapped up in emotions, and it was a very sensitive part of me, and being in a masculine body and trying to fit into that mold, it wasn't something that I trusted. I didn't trust it in the presence of authority. I didn't trust it in the presence of my peers, although I was always a very emotionally attuned person. But, I sort of kept that in one area of my life and didn't let it expand elsewhere. But at this time, it's like the intuition it's like I was surrendering to this inner voice, and it was like becoming an authority, which sounds great, but that's it sets you on a path that once you step foot on, it's quite the adventure. And it was no longer really, I felt, in my control. It's like I was really, several things started to happen and felt like they were spinning out of control, and I was leaving my clinic and I didn't have a plan, and I was just started writing, and then I started, the intuition started coming through in a form of hearing and with guides and things like that. And I just started showing up with clients after having just meditated and just started speaking from a different voice, letting go, not forgetting, but letting go of a lot of the conceptualization and intellectualization and structure that I'd used to work with clients, even though in retrospect I was always working intuitively. But in my mind, I had all this theory, and I was conceptualizing, and I was being the psychologist, and I just kind of stopped doing that. It wasn't even necessarily a conscious choice. It was like when I showed up, my mind went blank, and I just came into presence, and I kind of knew what to say and what to do. And that process continued for quite a while, throughout the years, and it continues now. And it's evolved in a variety of ways, and with quite a few, I guess, what I would call spiritual experiences, or just non-physical experiences of channeling, experiences of mediumship, all kinds of things. But primarily, when I show up as Daniel, and I show up in presence, and I tune in, just like now, and and let it flow, and trust that what's meant to come through will be for the highest and best. And that's a very different intention and approach that I lived my life previously by, which was, always trying to think ahead, trying to know, trying to be smart enough and good enough and planned and strategic. And I'm not that way so much anymore, which is can be scary at times, but all the more rewarding. And really, I'll come back to the idea that the health piece, that continues to guide my way, because, a lot of people are drawn to the kind of fantastical experiences, that we hear about. But for me, it was really, and it continues to be, the health of my body, and just the trauma healing journey, and the layers of wounding that come up alongside the light and the guidance and all that. And I continue to integrate that as best I can.
Wow. So beautiful, so much in what you shared, and that I can relate to, and hopefully some of our listeners can relate to, if not now, but sometimes in the near future. What is time anyway? um, Look, I mean, that's just fabulous, because I do relate to what you're saying as a neuroscientist who's left the lab in 2021 because of a similar pull, like to just not follow the norm, but also get in tuned to whatever was guiding me outside of the human condition. So yeah, I'm just really thrilled that we're on the same page there. And just for our listeners who are maybe clinical psychologists or maybe just, moms, parents, or any, like just who are not in the field of any of this, how do you distinguish mediumship from channeling?
Oh, well, yeah, okay, we can definitely go there. Um, you know, one thing I found when I was still within the clinical psych world is there are so many labels, right? There were so many labels that are hard to discern, and sometimes the language was hard to comprehend, and so there were different approaches to psychology. There was CBT and psychoanalysis and then just existential theory and all kinds of, and then the whole world of trauma healing, which has exploded now, and so there are all these labels and different things, but at the end of the day, they were all kind of pointing to the same thing. But people were, beholden to their approaches and to their lineages and to their theories, which is fine. We all develop wisdom from certain places and want to label it and identify it. And when I was sort of leaving that, I thought I was leaving that, that sort of that mixture of all these labels and having to discern. But lo and behold, I enter this spiritual world, and there are all these new labels that I know nothing about. All the clairs, and all these different labels for different aspects of like connecting to spirit, and some people take that very seriously, the delineation of that. To be honest, I don't take it as seriously. I find it generally that they're all pointing to the same thing, whether we call it intuition or accessing a higher part of ourselves, or just remembering that we are connected to something non-physical and that there is a spirit realm. And so from that perspective, I use the word channel very broadly. I mean, some people use the word channel very specifically, right? There's the Bashars and there's the Abraham Hicks and there's the people who are really connecting to like either one being or it's taking over or whatever. And that's cool. I'm into that stuff. But to me, we're all channels, right? We're all channeling something. It's just that most of us are channeling our conditioning, our trauma, our reactivity, our wounds, right? But once you get into a flow state, it doesn't have to be spiritual. Once you just access something higher, something that feels lighter, you just start channeling something different, right? A musician who enters the studio and gets into a flow, right? They're just channeling, we could call creativity, right? But the channel, I would call it a divine presence there too. Or if you just start writing without thinking, right? What do they call that? Free writing or whatever. It's channeled writing to me, right? So these are all these different forms of channeling, and for me, it has happened in a spectrum of ways. Like I have had, when it first started, the reason I even started to use that word is because I started to have experiences that were different from, I guess, my relationship to the guidance had been previously. It started to come closer to me. I started to hear it more strongly, and I started to speak in a way where I wasn't just speaking what I was hearing. It was just coming through. So it was a much more in the moment flowing kind of experience, and I would go into different states of trance at different times. But this was just happening to me in meditation. It's not like, which is how all the experiences kind of started for me.
Any
And then
particular
it got to a
type of
point.
meditation? Sorry to interrupt you. Any particular type of meditation in case people want to try it out? I know there's no one size fits all, but what kind of meditation?
Yeah, but to be honest, I wouldn't go chasing these experiences. To be perfectly honest, I you know I know it sounds great, and some might want to experience it, but if it's meant for you, it will find you. Trust me. But I'll say that. But to answer the question, I'll say, generally just silent, meditation, which I'd practiced for years. Sometimes I would use, sound or different things, but you know, it's not going to be one tool that opens your third eye and connects you to spirit. It's going to be your own readiness and what you're meant to experience. And while those experiences were cool, they're also, they turned my life upside down, and it takes a lot of integration work to come back down to earth. So, it's not necessarily for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, but it did, at that time I started to hear over and over about the Pleiadians, which I didn't know anything about, and I kept being told that I was one of them, and I was hearing from
Yeah.
this council and all kinds of things, and I
I love the
understandably felt like,
Pleiadians. Just an FYI, I
um,
love them. I'm a Pleiadian star
Yeah,
too, but
I
I
look,
love them.
this apparently I am too. I I talk about it loosely these days because, again, I find that, at least for myself, I can get caught up in the same kind of labeling trappings that I got caught up in the clinical world. Like, am I a starseed? Am I this? And the truth is I'm still just me. These are experiences I was having and things I was hearing and felt guided to share, and I did start to share them. Um, but the journey keeps changing because, I feel a little more integrated now than I did. At that time, I was feeling pretty off my rocker. I was like so high in the clouds, my feet were not on the ground. I was having trouble functioning, to be honest, in the
Yeah.
world. And so that took a lot of time. And these days, that channel's still open. I still hear and I still speak from that place. Um, but I think for my own sanity, it's important just to remember that I'm human and having this
Oh,
human
completely.
experience.
Completely. I said this a couple of episodes ago, but it really resonates. It's like, the guides, the angels, archangels, the Pleiadians, this and that. I mean, it's all great, but bottom line, here you are. Here I am. Like,
Here
I'm
I
the
am.
one living
Right.
my life, like right
Yeah.
here in this predominant 3D reality. That's my experience. And I'm a neuroscientist on top of that. So it's like, okay, that's really great that I'm connected to all these other realms and I'm inhabiting all these other realms and other beings and all that. And yeah, we're all connected, but hey, this is my experience. So yeah.
Someone's got to live it, right? Like I'm definitely wired toward what I would call transcendence. Like I want to escape. I wanted to stay in the Pleiades, I want to go back. But
Yeah.
that's not the point. The point is that, like, I came here to be with this body, to feel all the feelings I gotta. It's no different than anyone else's healing journey, really. And I think some of these labels, like Starseed, they sound really cool to the point where everyone would want to be one, I think, right? And if they're not one, they might be, oh, I'm not a starseed. Does that mean I'm not
Mhm.
gifted, or I don't have? It's like, no, no, no. Trust me, everyone's gifted. Everyone has a path. It's just gonna look the way it's meant to look, and it's always going to involve staying connected to this earth and this body, and I'd be the first person to say I don't always feel like doing that, but I'm learning, I'm learning that it's of the utmost importance.
Yeah, and apparently there's thousands, if not millions, of souls waiting for the human experience.
Yeah,
Like waiting in
yeah.
line, and here we are experiencing it. And it's funny how the humanity of it, like, oh, I'm experiencing now, but I want to get out. Let me out
Yeah,
of
it's
here.
like, oh, I really wanted this. I was waiting for this. Damn it.
I know, especially during those moments, right, when you're really like, oh wow, really, I don't like this. Get me out of here.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
What was that?
I'll answer the other question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll answer the other question quickly, which is to discern with from me. I mean, others I'm sure would have all different kinds of answers. Mediumship is typically referred to as a kind of psychic practice. So everyone who's a medium is psychic, but it specifically refers to talking to the dead. To
Mm.
to keep it short, yeah.
Yeah, that's very crystal clear and concise. So thank you for distinguishing between the two. Wow, there's so much. There's this, the clinical psychologist and all the knowledge that comes with that, and the practice and the branching off and like your personal interest within that field, which, is a vast field, and the mediumship and the intuitive side and I mean, it's like it's a lot. So yeah, I guess you can't really, in 2 words, yeah, intuitive psychologist, I think is is a very
It's been hard for me to define myself, and there were periods where I was defining myself a bit more on the fringe and really embracing the starseed kind of stuff and talking about it more explicitly. And I started to feel that, as my journey changed and I needed different kinds of grounding and integration, that um, just to come back a little bit to the center in terms of the ways that I um, at least labeled myself, or I'm happy to identify those as those things and
sure.
having those experiences. But I think it was for my own sense of just alignment, identity,
Mm.
to just be like, okay, all those things may be true, but when I talk about myself, I'm a psychologist, I'm intuitive, and people who want to know anything else, they'll get to it.
They can ask me later on a podcast when they
Yeah,
interview me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I completely relate because I sort of think about it as a part. I mean, it's a very linear way of thinking about it, but I am human. I think about it like a past lifetime, and I know all lifetimes are happening all at once and parallel realities and all this stuff, but I'm like, yeah, there's the Pleiadian lifetime, there's, the Lyran one, there's me in the 11th century, Norway, somewhere up there, the
yeah.
Viking, or, whatever, 30 BC in Mesopotamia. Kind of, like, just like, I kind of, like, I think about it in that way. And yeah, and as you say, it's just, I'm just curious, like, there's this curiosity, but I'm a curious being. I'm just curious about it all, rather than a labeling being, I'm very
Yeah.
curious about it just to find out. And yeah, we can't help but put it into human language because we are human, and that's one of the ways in which we communicate. So, of
Yeah.
course, it diminishes the full thing, but but we do the best we can.
And I think that's part of the expansion is like, and why it can feel so challenging is when that expansion starts to happen. The expansion of the mind is there are all these different identities or lives or aspects of yourself. Even if we didn't know anything about that. Like internal family systems is really popular these days. So it's parts of us, right? Even if we just say that we're this human being, well, we still have an infinite amount of parts.
Yeah.
And then the mind expands and oh, I'm more than this and I'm this and I'm that and I'm all of it. And I think at the end of the day we come back to just being who we are and just attempting to discover that sense of authenticity as best we can because attaching to any of the labels out there is no better than attaching to any of the labels in here. Um, so I'm Daniel, and everything else is up for discussion,
Right.
and is kind of part of the ride.
Right. And even the Daniel, right? I talk about it in terms of neural circuitry because when you're a baby, you know this. When you're a baby, you kind of can't distinguish between yourself and mother and everyone else. And then that neural loop, oh, I'm Daniel or I'm Val, it forms. And at some point, somebody said it so many times that that neural circuit becomes who you are. But
Yeah.
are you really that? Like that's even up for
No.
grabs.
Yeah. Oh, it's totally up for grabs. I just say it that way because it seems like the simplest to really pare it down, right? Well, the name that I was given, the name that I embody, that seems like a good place to lead from because it's the simplest, most reduced form. But no, we're not any of that. Not really.
Wow, amazing. So, Daniel, what are you up to these days? I mean, what does your life look like? What's your mission? I know these are kind of big topics, but we're all, well, at least some of us are awakening to that. I am for sure. Like, what am I doing here at this point in time?
Yeah. Well, primarily, I still see individual clients, and recently, to be honest, I took a really big break from any kind of online presence. My body was signaling that I was getting a little caught up in it. Just all the things I was doing, I was doing a lot of live events online and my podcasts and all kinds of stuff, and spending a lot of time alone in my apartment, and getting caught up in honestly the kind of like the social media influencer kind of world, which it's hard not to when you're, sharing content. And that's just not me, to be honest. And I was very ungrounded from other things, from like the channel being on all the time and for trying to serve people and also for trying to deliver this content and just because social media can be very inherently ungrounding. So I shut it all down. I didn't do anything online I literally, of course it's synchronistic. Like since you had reached out to me, I had just started to like edit some old podcasts and just feel like, okay, I want to get back in, getting back into it in a way that's aligned. I'm not really sure yet how I'll step fully back in, but, there were all those creative projects that I was doing and I'll probably still do some of them, but I'm really guided right now to engage with the real world off the screen. And I have a really, like resonant place in my heart for young people on the neurodivergent spectrum, because I'm certainly on that spectrum. The spectrum, I don't know where I am. It's a pretty big spectrum for me because
Yeah.
it includes some other things that are not often talked about. But these days, it's actually a little bit more common, the confluence between neurodivergence and connections to spirit, or these
Yeah.
capacities and gifts, right? It's getting really trendy now, right?
I
With
know
the
with the
telepathy tapes and
tapes.
all that.
It's
Yeah.
getting
So,
really.
but I'm really, I love kids, and that's who I worked with a lot throughout my career, and I have an affinity for this population because I feel that I'm in a position just through my journey and my own conditioning, my own brain, my own experience to support them and help them expand. And, not just to try to, activate the psychic parts or whatever. If that's meant to happen, it's meant to happen. But just to support them, and see them in the
Mm.
way that, I can see myself. And, um, I've been actually exploring different programs to sort of to plug into a system. I'm looking at some places actually in Costa Rica as we speak that
Ooh.
I might want to plug into as a psychologist, but also as some of the other things, right? And it's it's the whole package. It's me, but I have visions of maybe a healing center one day to support these kinds of people. Um, and just with a sacred connection to the land, and a kind of leadership and community that embraces the healing path and accessing our gifts, whatever they may be. So that's kind of where my focus is at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, sort of foundationally, I still see individual clients. I still lead workshops in person, and I haven't done online stuff in a while, but online as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just seeing where the path takes me.
It's so beautiful, just being intuitively guided, and also there's a couple of things. There, it seems to be a trend. The last couple of people I interviewed and am about to interview are really for this new generation of children that's coming and that has
Yeah,
come already, and the kind of world
yeah,
that they'll create and are creating is
yeah,
vastly different from the one that we have been in. So, you
yeah,
could talk about it. I was just talking to Rachel Vaughan a couple of episodes ago, but she's an expert on auras, and she sees people's auras through like through when they're born to the next lifetime, like what's coming through, and she devised this whole amazing like structure of auras, and a lot of the
mhm.
children that are coming in are like vibrating at levels that people
They're really
that
high.
they're just
Yeah,
like they're coming in as diamonds, which for people it takes
yeah,
lifetimes to get to that level of vibration. So she's like, these kids are coming in
yeah,
as that, which is like incredible. So they really do have this incredible mission on Earth in terms of its ascension, evolution, whatever you want to say. So I'm just like, I love
and I
it.
will say, I will to use that word. I will say a lot of them are star seeds, like a lot of them, and I just know when I see it, and um, I can feel it. I can feel their vibration, and yeah, but it doesn't. I think sometimes when we talk about this, it's hard not to then see them as special or as supremely gifted, even though they are. But there's a lot of difficulties coming to this planet with that kind of makeup. As others, as those of us who have already, been here, attempting to acclimate, can speak to. So, there are so many amazing aspects of the young people coming in, and they have their work cut out for them as well. I think it's up to, and to echo your point about others, also speaking of interest to this. I feel very, I can't say for sure, but I do feel it's a part of my mission to play a role in helping clear the landscape for them and just ushering them into being who they came here to be, because they are very different and they live in a very different world already. And on a soul level, they came prepared for that, but on a human level, I think there is just going to be more. A lot of people speak to the Aquarian age these days, right? And I think on a soul level and the kinds of frequency they're operating on. It is a more collective experience. It's not going to be such an individualistic pursuit for material gain, ambition, and success. And there is still a lot of that conditioning on the planet. So many of us fall into that. But I feel that in their nature, they're just less interested, and there's going to be more communities based on a kind of new forms of communication, new forms of leadership, new forms of healing and connection, new forms of relationship, new forms of family.
Yeah.
I think there's room for a lot of newness, and I think they will be a powerful bridge to usher in that new paradigm.
So exciting. It's an exciting time. I'm just like excited. I'm an excitable
I
person.
know,
But
it's exciting to me. That's why
yeah. And
follow it.
I've got two kids. I've got a 9-year-old and he's really into telekinesis. And this is what we're talking about, right? I'm like, where is
Yeah.
this? Like, I'm not actively, modeling that. So I'm like,
Right,
I'm
right.
like, where are you learning this stuff? I even asked him, I'm like, so, if there's any, like, what do you want to become when you grow up kind of thing? And he's like, I want to be an expert in telekinesis, mom. I was like,
That's
all right,
amazing.
well, when you
Yeah.
teach,
A lot of new jobs are going to be out there.
like, when you learn how to do that, you better teach me because I want to move shit around with my mind too. Yeah, and
And I,
beyond.
I think that, it's funny, and of course it's trendy, and like the telepathy tapes and stuff, but and there will be a lot of stepping stones to get to whatever people think that looks like, but I do see in general just new forms of communication, right? Like we already communicate with our minds, and we communicate in many ways outside of the explicit word, and with these younger generations, I think communication is already changing in our environment with AI and technology, right? So it's already shifting on the planet, and I think these younger people are just going to continue to usher in new, more communal and collective forms of communication. I have no idea where it'll go, but and also that applies in parallel to the communication with source, right? To the open channel,
Yeah.
because because in order to be able to communicate authentically with the outer world, we need to be able to communicate internally and vertically, so to speak, with the higher aspects.
Yeah. And just so, yeah, everything you say resonates. I have got nothing to say other than just to sit there, and be like, yeah, because yeah. And and I love how you have, it takes something to listen to your body to the extent to which you have in what you've shared, because people, we don't listen to our bodies in the way that you have explained, where we're like, okay, now's the time to step away from this or to really, to not wait until it's like a catastrophe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, like, the joke I often make is I would have appreciated a nicely worded letter from spirit that it was time to change my life, but I would have thrown that in the trash because I needed the heavy invitations. And people will look at my life, family and friends included, and say that I'm very disciplined and, with what I take into my body and things like that. And it's true, but, you know, I'm not sure I had so much of a choice in that. I mean, I think I have the personality to embrace that, but, it was through crisis that I couldn't do what other people, wanted to do all the time. I mean, I partied it up in my 20s. I did lots of substances because, again, I wanted that transcendence. I wanted to escape. But the body, again, keeps the score and kept me into it and kept pulling me. And even as I aligned with the psychological field and the clinical field, it just kept pulling me. And at a certain point, and I had resisted it most of my life. And at a certain point, I said, "All right, you win. Let's do this together. I will continue to serve you. I don't know where the money's going to come from. I don't know where the stability is going to come from. If it comes, I don't know where all the things I want will come from. But I've learned enough through 36, almost 37 years that's what I have to honor, and that as I continue to surrender to that, good things do happen. So I'm not sure I'm any different than anybody else, but it's through those sensitivities that kind of really forced me to continue to honor that path, and to the point where now I want to. I didn't always want to.
I hear you. I do. I really do. Well, look, Daniel, thank you so much for just having this incredible conversation, very expansive, which is the way I like to keep it. So really, really
Same here.
thanks for, just talking about everything and sharing yourself and your life and your experience with the listeners, with me. It's been an absolute privilege, and I can't wait to talk to you again at some point down the track where, more awakening has occurred. Yeah.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. And for the listeners, if you love this pod, as always, share, subscribe. You don't never know whose life you're going to touch by sharing something that they may resonate with, and this may be one of those things. All right, I'll see you next time. Thank you.